How do you feel when you have to wait for something that you've been wanting for a very long time? What if it was something you couldn't live without? Well, that was a story for young Aaliyah Boatwright. In their article, Joy in Life Comes Easy to a Young Recipient, we learned that just as a toddler, doctors discovered that her heart was severely damaged, and even at that young age, she would need a heart transplant. Thanks to a generous donor, she received the heart. Just 6 years later, a degenerative condition affected her coronary arteries. And again, an unselfish provided her coronary arteries. Later in December of 2004, her mother was diagnosed with the same symptoms as her daughter. And guess who was there as a voice of experience? That's right, Aaliyah Boatwright was the voice of support and experience for her mother as she went through her transplantation process. So, what if Aaliyah's story applied to your life? What if you had to go through what she went through at that young age? Wouldn't you hope and pray that somebody would donate or there would be somewhere a don, because if you have a heart, save a life. Now, today we will be talking about the history of organ transplantation, the need for organ donors, and how you can become an organ donor. The history organ transplantation has gone through an extensive amount of history. And in the article, A Brief History of Organ Transplantation, we learned that in 1540, an act of parliament allowed some surgeons access to corpses from criminals from the gallows, and this had a purpose to study anatomy through dissection. Nearly 400 years later, in 1954, identical twins underwent surgery so that one brother's kidney could be transplanted into his ill brother. Another notable time in history would be in 1968 when the Uniform Anatomical Gift Act was enacted in the United States. This act basically stated that anybody who was 18 or older could donate his or her organs upon death, and they could even decide or choose, specify who they wanted their don to go to, or if the hospital could just use them to their best discretion. Another important date would have to be in 1984. This affected organ transplantation in many ways because the United States government passed the National Organ Transplant Act. Basically, this act affected it because it made it illegal to buy or sell organs in the United States. It also created a large nonprofit organization called the United Networks for Organ Sharing, which was created to oversee other nonprofit organizations. Now, people all over the world, even here in Texas, need organ transplants, whether it's a pancreas, liver, a heart, kidney, lung, intestines, you name it. Point is, they need our help. They need our organs. Now, the problem is that there is a lack of organs and organ donors who make it possible. And according to the article Donate Life, an estimated 123,000 people, including men, women, and children, are currently waiting for a life-saving transplant in the National Transplant List. And out of that, an estimated 13,300 live in the state of Texas. During the course of the speech, someone may have been added to the transplant list. It happens every 10 minutes. And according to the article, The Need is Real, each day an average of 81 organ transplants take place, but an average of 22 people die because of a lack of organs that were donated. Now, in this graph, we see the difference between the people in the waiting list and the donors. And we can see that the gap just keeps getting bigger and bigger as the years go by. Now, I do understand that the statistics could be overwhelming and hard to understand at times, but I do want you to remember that these numbers that we see here are people that are waiting for a life-saving transplant, or even people who left a long-lasting legacy through organ donation. Now, before we move on, I'd like to share a poem that I came across as I was doing my research. The poem To Remember Me by Robert Tess really reminds me of how one organ donor could make a difference for somebody. The poem exclaims, Give my sight to the man who has never seen a sunrise, a baby's face, or love in the eyes of a woman. Give my heart to a person whose heart has caused nothing but endless days of pain. Take my bones, every muscle, every fiber and nerve in my body, and find a way to make a crippled child walk. Take my cells, if necessary, and let them grow so that someday a speechless boy will shout at the cracker of a bat and a deaf girl will hear the sound of rain against her windows. An organ transplant can really become the difference between a life of difficulty or just making the recipient's life easier. I'm sure you can now see the need for organ donors in our area or anywhere. So now you may be asking yourself, how can I become an organ donor? Well, in the article by Shay Irving, NOLO Law for All, he explains basic general ways that you can register to become a donor. One of the ways that he explains is that you can register online with your organ donor database at Donate Life, and it literally only takes a few minutes. You just submit your information, or if you don't feel comfortable, you could just download the form and send it in by mail. And then all your information will be gathered, and your wish to become a donor will be safe and easy accessible. Another form of registering is whenever you go renew your driver's license, you are asked if you would like to become an organ donor. If you mark that box yes, a red heart will appear in the cover in the front of your driver's license. And the advantage of that is that you won't have to register online anymore. And that way you just let people know that you do want to become a donor. Now, don't just think about becoming a donor. Actually sign up and do it. Because if you don't tell anybody, your wishes to become a donor may never be known. Nobody would know. And I understand that becoming an organ donor may not be the easiest decision, but it could really be the greatest gift you could ever give. I've shared with you a brief history of organ transplantation, the need for organ donors, and how you can become an organ donor. What if a person waiting on that waiting list, needing an organ, was somebody you loved? What gratitude would you feel towards that person that provided that organ and gave your loved one a second chance of life? Everyone deserves a second chance. Become that person for someone else and give life to someone in need. Because if you have a heart, save a life.